It started with a sound that didn't belong, a short, breathy chuckle that came from something too round and too still to be capable of laughter. I was in the kitchen at 12:17 a.m., barefoot, hunched over a leaking bottle of orange juice, when the watermelon on the counter let out a low, breathy laugh. I froze. The air changed immediately, like something sacred had been violated. The kind of laugh that doesn't demand a response, but confirms you've already lost. I looked at the fruit. It hadn't moved. Perfectly centered, smooth green skin, the kind of watermelon you imagine when you lie to yourself about eating healthy. It sat like it had always been there, yet I couldn't remember buying it. I leaned in slightly, squinting as if distance could dilute the wrongness. Then it happened again, slightly louder, slightly wetter. This time I was sure. The watermelon was laughing, not vibrating, not creaking, not slipping, laughing. I opened my mouth to say something, maybe a question, maybe a prayer, but before I could, the rind split clean down the middle with a delicate, almost surgical pop, and from the thin crack, a pressurized stream of dark red fluid shot out with surgical precision, hitting me square in the chest. The blood, because it was blood, was warm, thick, and moved with the confidence of something that had lived inside something else. It ran down my skin in slow, intentional trails, pooling at my waistband. I gasped, but the sound caught in my throat and turned into a dry swallow. The watermelon tilted slightly, as if admiring its work, and then, with a movement so unnatural it felt rehearsed, it hopped. It didn't roll. It didn't fall. It hopped. A single, perfect vertical bounce that carried it 3 feet into the air and directly toward the undersink cabinet, which swung open just before contact. The watermelon passed through without touching the frame, and the door closed behind it as gently as a whisper. The kitchen fell into complete silence. No hum of the fridge, no tick from the clock, just my own breathing, fast, uneven, and the slow realization that my heart was pounding in the exact rhythm of the watermelon's laugh. I backed away, glancing at the closed cabinet, half expecting it to jiggle or breathe. Nothing. I looked down at my chest. The blood was soaking into my skin as if I were made of paper. I stumbled to the bathroom. Every light switch I touched flickered once before complying. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were sunken, more than usual. My mouth looked like it had said something I didn't remember saying. My belly looked deeper. My navel looked wider, like something had been pulled out or was trying to pull me in. I splashed water on my face. It smelled like copper and fruit gone wrong. When I raised my head again, I saw it. In the mirror, down the hallway behind me, there it was, the watermelon, sitting politely. Steam rose from its rind like it had just been cooked. I turned around instantly. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but the floor was wet. Not puddles. Lines. Lines of dark red fluid running toward the kitchen. I followed them, slowly, barefoot. The tiles were cold, and each step sounded slightly wrong, like I was walking on something that remembered being flesh. I reached the cabinet. The door was closed again. Something inside scraped, faintly. I reached out, hand trembling, palm sweating. My fingertips brushed the handle. It was warm. Not recently used warm. Alive warm. I pulled. The door creaked open, slow and deliberate. Inside, there was no plumbing, no pipes, no shelf, just darkness. And a smell. Not rot, not sewage. A smell like childhood memories gone sour. Like a school lunchbox left closed too long in summer. A smell of fruit, regret, and teeth. I knelt, slowly, head tilted, peering into the black. I saw movement. I saw rind. I saw eyes. Not mine, not human, just watching. And then something whispered from the dark. You laughed first. And the door slammed shut on my hand. The cabinet swallowed my hand before I had time to scream. And the moment the door snapped shut, the kitchen dissolved. Not vanished, dissolved, like sugar melting into warm water. The linoleum beneath me folded inward with a soft crunch, and the air turned dense, textured, like breathing through wet wool. My fingers still touched something, though it wasn't wood anymore. It felt like velvet soaked in saliva. Whatever it was, it gripped back, not violently, almost gently, as if inviting me to crawl deeper. I didn't resist. I was pulled, shoulder first, then chest, then legs, as the world of angles and corners gave way to a tunnel made of fibrous tissue that twitched at my touch. I slid downward through something warm and pink and wrong. The walls breathed, contracting rhythmically around me like the inside of a sleeping throat. The further I went, the more I forgot the sound of my own name. I tried to look behind me, but there was no behind, only more tunnel, pulsing and swallowing me with every inch. I could smell fruit, not fresh fruit, overripe, fermented, like a fruit bowl left in grief. When the tunnel ended, I landed on a floor that was soft and spongy, but not entirely solid. It gave under my weight, absorbing part of me like it was glad I arrived. The room, if it could be called that, stretched out in all directions, walls formed of pulpy meat vein patterns, ceiling covered in something that looked like condensation but blinked every few seconds. In the center of the space was the watermelon. It floated slightly above the ground, slowly rotating like a planet ashamed of its orbit. Its crack had widened. Blood still dripped lazily from the split, now forming a circle around it. Thick, breathing puddles that inhaled and exhaled mist with each drop. Something stirred behind me. I turned, slowly, spine aching, and saw a pear. Yes, a pear. Brownish yellow, mottled with bruises, and pulsing faintly at the center. It stood on four thin limbs, bone-white and jointless, like insect legs made from old chalk. The top of the pear opened slightly, and a row of teeth grinned where the stem should have been. Its skin peeled itself slowly downward, revealing something inside that looked like muscle wrapped in prayer. The pear laughed, a high-pitched, screeching whimper of a sound that vibrated in my teeth. Then it spoke. Wrong fruit. My mouth was dry. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I felt something shift in my abdomen, a sharp pang, like a new organ waking up in protest. I stumbled back as the pear stepped forward, leaving behind a wet trail that sizzled against the floor. The watermelon, still hovering, opened further, and inside I saw something I wasn't prepared to see. It was me, curled inside its core like a fetus, my face, eyes open, mouth stuffed with seeds. The version of me inside the fruit twitched once, then blinked, then smiled. The pear hissed behind me, voice gurgling. This is what comes of curiosity. This is the harvest. Suddenly, the walls brightened with a deep glowing red, like light filtered through a screen. From the ceiling above, dozens of vines descended, tipped with fruit I recognized but distorted. An apple with lips, a banana folded into itself, a plum leaking what looked like letters. They hung above me, silent and expectant, like witnesses to a trial whose verdict was already known. The watermelon pulsed once, then twice, then split in half with a thick, wet crack. Out poured a tide of seeds, hundreds, maybe thousands, each the size of a tooth, clicking as they bounced along the floor toward me. They circled around my feet, forming a spiral. I couldn't step out. I tried, but something invisible pressed against my shins. The version of me inside the watermelon sat up. Its mouth moved. No sound. But I understood. You don't eat the fruit. You become it. The floor dropped beneath me like an elevator made of breath, and I fell, face first, into my own rind. The fall didn't end. It changed direction. I wasn't descending anymore. I was curving. The tunnel around me bent in slow, impossible arcs, like being sucked through a spiral of intestine designed by an architect with a grudge against gravity. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Fear had been chewed up somewhere in the first few feet of descent and spat out like pulp. Now all I felt was weight, not physical weight, memory weight, emotional sediment clinging to the inner walls of whatever I was passing through. The sound of seeds grew louder, not tumbling or scattering, tapping, like fingertips on glass. A rhythm, specific, intentional. I started to hear patterns in it, like Morse code made by someone trapped inside a fruit. The tunnel began to pulse around me again, synchronizing with my breath, until I realized it wasn't sinking. It was leading, teaching, training. When I landed, the room was already waiting for me. It wasn't a room in the architectural sense. It was shaped like a stomach, lined with soft ridges that quivered at my gaze. I stood slowly, legs shaking like new saplings in bad wind. The floor was moist, gently sloped, and covered in something that looked like the inside of an apology. The air was thick with juice and morning. Ahead of me, the watermelon rested in a shallow pit, no longer floating, no longer split. It had sealed itself, whole again, breathing slowly. The blood had dried along its rind, forming dark red veins that shimmered faintly when I exhaled too hard. I moved toward it without meaning to. My feet had their own contract now. Something inside my mouth clicked. A tooth, maybe, or a seed I'd never swallowed. I reached the pit, stared down at the watermelon, and waited. Then it cracked open again. Not a jagged break this time. A clean, patient separation, like it was opening a door it had used before. From within, a hand emerged. My hand. Except it wasn't mine. Not now. It was softer, glistening, trembling. It reached up and held out something. A spoon. Wooden. Worn. Burned along the edge with a symbol I almost recognized. 2 dots and a line. Like a face trying not to scream. I took the spoon. The room shifted. From the walls, sounds leaked. Voices. Low, slow, sticky voices that mumbled half-truths in tones I didn't trust. One whispered my birthday. Another whispered a name I forgot on purpose. A third just hummed the jingle from a cereal commercial I hadn't heard in decades. The watermelon widened its split, revealing more of what was inside. Layers of flesh, soft and layered like a jawless mouth, trembling slightly in anticipation. The spoon twitched in my hand. I knelt. I dipped it into the fruit. The first bite slid into my mouth before I could think. Sweet, bitter, cold, familiar in a way that hurt. My tongue recoiled, but my throat accepted. I swallowed and felt the pulp slither down with a gurgle that echoed far too long. Something shifted in my spine. My skin itched from the inside out. I took another bite. The watermelon groaned. I chewed slowly. Voices rose. The room trembled. The spoon grew heavier. Then the wall ahead split open, and from it walked a version of myself I had never been. This one was confident, taller, dressed in layers of skin that looked ironed. He smiled without lips and blinked in reverse. His voice came out of my own ears. "You're digesting yourself." I nodded. The watermelon pulsed again. Inside it, I saw my reflection, not in water, but in juice. My face, slightly rotted, smiling. Behind me, the spoon began to sing. The voices joined in. I didn't know the melody, but I hummed anyway. I ate again, and again, until I couldn't tell where my mouth ended and the rind began. I kept eating, long after hunger left the room. My jaw moved like it remembered something I didn't, an ancient rhythm inherited from mouths that once fed on dreams instead of flesh. The watermelon wasn't getting smaller. Every bite seemed to birth another layer, each one stranger than the last. Beneath the red pulp came a layer of soft gray, chalky, warm, tasting like unfinished business. Underneath that, a fibrous gold streak that hummed when chewed. And below that, a marrow-like jelly that didn't taste like anything but made me cry. The spoon no longer needed me. It guided itself now, gently scooping, rising, sliding into my mouth without effort. My hands were limp, resting on my thighs, fingers twitching with remembered resistance. Each bite rewrote something inside me, the shape of my memories, the placement of shame, the order of years. I forgot my first kiss and replaced it with the first time I lied about liking watermelon. I forgot the face of my father and replaced it with the face of the fruit, split wide, eternally smiling. Behind me, the other version of myself, the tall one, the perfect one, the version I might have become if I hadn't flinched so often, sat quietly, sharpening a seed between his fingernails. He didn't speak anymore. He just nodded, occasionally, as if approving my pace. The room darkened. The walls pulled closer, squeezing slightly, like a throat preparing to swallow. In the distance, I heard a bell, faint, metallic, mournful. Then again, closer. It rang with the exact tone of an alarm clock buried beneath regret. The spoon paused. The watermelon vibrated. And then it screamed. Not out loud, but inside me. A high-pitched, elastic screech that stretched across my organs. I dropped the spoon, finally, and clutched my stomach. It was moving, swelling. Something beneath the skin squirmed like 1,000 seeds trying to germinate at once. My belly bulged forward and then pulled back, twitching with a rhythm I couldn't claim as mine. I looked down and saw patterns forming beneath the surface, small ridges, ovals, the outline of rind. My stomach was becoming a fruit. I stood. The spoon tried to follow but fell, splashing into the juice. I turned toward the tall version of myself, but he was gone. The room was empty now. Even the walls had begun to fold inward, slow and deliberate, like a room closing its eyes. The watermelon lay gutted in front of me, but its smile remained, wide, glowing faintly. Inside its husk, something pulsed, a tiny heart, a tiny version of me, still forming. I backed away, but the floor moved with me. The room no longer allowed retreat. The bell rang again, louder now. It came from my mouth. I opened my lips, and a seed dropped out. Then another, then 3. I doubled over. Dozens of them spilled onto the ground, each one twitching like it was tasting the air. The room applauded, soundless but full of pressure. My legs gave out. I collapsed into the pulp. It embraced me, sticky, warm, welcoming. The juice soaked my skin, then slid inside, rewriting the temperature of my blood. I breathed in, and the air was no longer air. It was flavor. I tasted my own name, slowly dissolving into something simpler, something rounder, something hollow. Above me, the spoon rose one last time, trembling, dripping. It pointed to the ceiling, where a hatch had opened. Not mechanical, not spiritual, just there, a door, and beyond it, the kitchen, waiting. The hatch above me widened slowly, its edges slick and glistening like freshly cut fruit left too long in the sun. I could see the outline of my kitchen through it, perfectly preserved in its midnight hush. Countertop stained with juice, a single chair pulled halfway out from the table, the humming refrigerator blinking its slow code of indifference. The contrast was unbearable. Below, pulp and breath and decay. Above, linoleum, habit, normalcy. My body, slick with seed milk and memory, twitched toward the opening, but the fruit that had grown inside me protested. It shifted, pressing against my ribs, sliding along my spine like a child refusing to be born. I reached upward. My fingers brushed the threshold. Warm air met my palm like an old friend lying through their teeth. But as I pulled myself toward the opening, something grabbed my ankle. Not a hand, a vine. Green, thick, and veined with thin red lines that pulsed like veins. It curled around me gently at first, like it wanted to dance. Then it tightened. It wasn't trying to pull me back. It was anchoring me, reminding me. "You're not done," it said, not aloud. Inside. The voice vibrated through the marrow of my legs, up into my throat, until I could feel the echo of it behind my teeth. My stomach bulged again. The thing growing in me was no longer still. It turned. It pressed. I felt its shape now. Not a creature, not a tumor, not a parasite. A seed. Large. Breathing. Thinking. I lowered myself from the hatch and fell back into the pulpy cradle of the room. My knees splashed into the fruit flesh, and the walls sighed in relief. I was expected. I was home. The watermelon husk that birthed me was closing now, curling in on itself like a dying smile. All around me, the walls began to sprout. Small buds. Dozens. Hundreds. Each one growing fast, popping open to reveal fruits that pulsed with subtle human features. Eyelashes. A finger. Once even a tongue. I stood in the middle of it all, arms hanging limp, unsure if I was victim or witness. My reflection, if it was still mine, dripped from the juice pooling around me. My face bent at wrong angles, stretched wide across the rind of a cantaloupe, blinking slowly in the corner. My voice called to me from the inside of a bruised banana, weeping in my mother's accent. I tried to take a breath, but exhaled seeds. Then, a mirror. Freestanding, tall, silver-edged, out of place, too clean. It rose from the fruit flesh in front of me, like a confession that had waited too long. I looked into it. The reflection blinked, but I hadn't. It raised a hand, slow and steady. I didn't move. Then it spoke, mouth moving in slow syrup. "You're ripening." The mirror rippled. From it stepped something wearing my skin like a poorly folded uniform. Taller, fuller, juicier. Its eyes were wide, gleaming with sugar. Its mouth was stitched with vine. It held out something in its palm. A fruit sticker. You know the kind. A little oval label with a barcode and a country name. But instead of a number, it had a date. Tomorrow. The thing peeled the sticker and pressed it gently to my chest. I looked down. It stuck. My skin absorbed it. The fruit in my gut pulsed once, hard. And then, stillness. The mirror closed. The lights, if they were lights, dimmed. And I heard a sound I had not heard in hours. The click of a refrigerator door. The hatch above me reopened. And I understood. I wasn't being pulled back. I was being shelved, labeled, stored. And somewhere, up there in the real world, a new fruit had appeared. On the counter. Not a watermelon, not a pear, something new. A fruit no one recognized yet. Smiling, watching, waiting. The hatch didn't beckon. It pulsed. A slow, steady glow radiated from its edges, casting dim halos on the flesh walls that throbbed with every memory I'd tried to forget. I stood at the base of it, no longer dripping, no longer trembling. The fruit within me had stopped moving, but not because it was gone. It had nested, rooted, made peace with the architecture of my insides. I wasn't carrying it anymore. I was hosting it, a greenhouse with skin. I reached for the edge again. This time, the vine didn't resist. It slithered back into the pulp without apology, like a leash being retracted. And the moment its grip loosened, I felt lighter, emptier, but not free. I climbed through the hatch and emerged onto the kitchen floor with a softness that wasn't mine. My hands pressed against tile, but it felt like pressing against something that had been watching tile. Familiar, but never truly known. The kitchen hadn't changed. Not visibly, but everything felt wrong. The clock still blinked its lazy red numbers, 12:59, but each blink made a soft squelch now. The fridge buzzed, but it buzzed in chords. The window reflected nothing. My body stood in the center of the room, but my presence lagged behind. I saw myself from above for a moment, head bowed, arms limp, belly still twitching beneath the surface like it was dreaming. On the counter sat a bowl. I hadn't placed it there. It was wooden, carved, polished with something organic. In it, fruits. Not store fruits. Not real fruits. Simulacra. An orange with pores shaped like question marks. A lemon with a soft pulse beneath its skin. A small green fig that was whispering numbers to itself in a voice that sounded like mine when I lied. I didn't touch any of them. The light above flickered. From inside the fridge, something knocked. Once, then twice. Then a long drag across the door, like fingernails made of bone and hunger. I didn't answer it. Instead, I turned to the hallway mirror. I had to look. I had to know. The reflection greeted me with a grin that wasn't mine. Not anymore. My face was the same, but shinier, slightly stretched, like it had been peeled off and reapplied with more enthusiasm than skill. My eyes were brighter, but empty. My stomach? Rounder. Not fat, not bloated. Full. Gestational. Beneath the skin, I saw movement again. Not one shape. Many. Like seeds shifting position, trying to spell something. The reflection opened its mouth. So did I. We spoke at the same time, but the words weren't planned. "I'm ready to serve." The lights dimmed completely. The hallway behind me darkened. From the baseboards, something began to sprout. Slow, spiraling vines, thick and green and wet. They spread across the floor, curling around table legs, snaking into outlets, whispering things to the toaster. The house welcomed them, not in fear, in recognition. From outside, a sound. Footsteps on gravel. Then the knock, not on the fridge this time, on the front door. 3 knocks. Then silence. I walked toward it slowly, my steps squelching slightly on the vine-soaked tile. My hand reached the knob, but I paused. I looked down. My belly moved. Not a kick, a shift. The fruit inside me was leaning forward, listening. I opened the door, and there on the porch stood a man holding a receipt. It was smeared, wet, unreadable. He looked at me, confused. "I think I ordered something," he said. I stepped aside. He entered. He sat at the table. The bowl in the center gleamed. The man reached forward, picked the fig, bit into it, and wept. The vines tightened around the base of the table like roots closing over a coffin. I turned away, back to the counter, back to the kitchen that now hummed with approval. And I understood, fully, completely, without resistance. I was no longer a guest in this house. I was the meal, and it wasn't dinner yet, but people were coming. They came in waves. At first, just 1 or 2. People I didn't recognize, faces blank with that soft, sleepy glaze of those who've wandered too far from themselves. They arrived without urgency, without questions, without names. The door never opened for them. It was simply no longer there. They walked into the kitchen like they'd always known where it was, like it had waited for them. Each took a seat at the table without speaking. They didn't look at me. They looked at the bowl. By the time the 6th had arrived, the fruits had changed. The fig was gone, its core now a sticky ring on the wood, pulsing slightly like a memory in relapse. In its place, a pale cluster of berries fused together like organs mid-development. Someone picked it up and swallowed it whole. They gagged once, then smiled, a trickle of juice dribbling from their ear. The others clapped, slowly, rhythmically, in silence. They clapped with their eyes. They clapped with their breath. I stood near the counter, arms crossed over my pulsing stomach, which by now had become a metronome of tension. The fruit inside me wasn't dormant. It was observing. My belly had hardened, the skin stretched taut, warm to the touch. I could feel it learning, cataloging. Each guest that arrived was mirrored inside me. A heartbeat that wasn't mine echoed through my ribs. Then the tall one returned, the version of me that had sharpened a seed in his hands. He entered like vapor, stepping out of the wall without surprise, without ceremony. His mouth was still stitched shut, but the message was clear. He pointed to my stomach, then to the bowl, then to the guests. One of them stood, a woman. Her jaw had loosened from its hinges and hung to one side like a cracked drawer. She reached into her mouth and pulled out a single, glistening pit. She placed it on the table in front of her. It twitched. Another guest followed suit. A man this time. He removed his fingernail like a sticker and laid it gently on the wood. The nail curled inward like a dying leaf. They were offering parts of themselves, not as payment, as ingredients. From the ceiling, vines lowered like chandeliers. The tips glowed faintly. wet with nectar. They reached into the bowl, stirring gently, humming. The bowl began to fill with steam. The fruits were boiling now, cooking without fire. A smell filled the room, not sweet, not foul, nostalgic, like the breath of a grandparent you loved but never trusted. My knees buckled slightly. The seed inside me turned. The guests looked at me for the first time, eyes wide, expectant, glowing. They began to chant, not words, but syllables shaped like hunger. A tempo built. They slammed their palms softly on the table. Once, twice, then faster. Their mouths opened in perfect synchrony. No sound emerged, just a collective inhalation. And I knew. They weren't here to eat. They were here to watch me be served. The tall version of me reached into his chest and pulled out the same spoon, still etched with the face that couldn't scream. He placed it into my hand. It burned. The kitchen lights blinked out. A spotlight formed over the bowl, and I stepped forward, toward the table, toward the guests, toward the next phase. No one stopped me, not even myself. I stood at the head of the table, spoon in hand, belly tight and humming like a drum that remembered war. The guests sat in a perfect arc, motionless now, heads tilted slightly upward, mouths parted just enough to taste the silence. The bowl steamed in the center, the fruits inside no longer recognizable, no longer fruits at all, but forms, soft shapes that pulsed with memories, bruised colors that flickered like old film. I didn't know what they were made of. I didn't need to. I had made them. The tall version of me stood behind the guests, arms crossed, smiling without lips. His eyes tracked my movements as I raised the spoon. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from alignment. Something inside me had synchronized with the room, with the bowl, with the guests. We were part of a single digestive process now. I wasn't feeding them. I was the feeding. The first guest leaned forward, their mouth stretched wider than it should have, wider than the skin could allow, revealing a gaping void lined with soft fruit flesh and tiny twitching teeth. I dipped the spoon into the bowl. It slid through the pulp like a hand through warm water. I scooped something. It blinked. I fed it to them. Their eyes rolled back. Their spine arched. Their fingernails fell off like petals. A low moan escaped their throat, a sound like something being uncorked. The others leaned closer. I moved to the next. Another scoop, another offering. They wept before the spoon touched their lips. One by one I served them. With each bite, their bodies changed. Some lost bones. Others grew stems from their shoulders. One man coughed up a leaf and pinned it behind his ear like a badge. They devoured me slowly, but from a distance, bit by bit, through proxy and pulp. The seed inside my stomach pulsed with pride. The walls of the kitchen began to curl inward. The wallpaper peeled like orange rind, revealing a soft, throbbing membrane beneath. From the corners of the ceiling, flies emerged, silent, silver-winged, hovering just above the bowl. They watched. They approved. After the final guest had eaten, they stood in unison. Their faces were smooth now, no eyes, no mouths, just ripe. They turned to me, bowed, and walked, in file, toward the refrigerator door, which opened by itself. Inside, not food. A tunnel of fruit light and vine, stretching endlessly. They entered without hesitation. When the last one passed through, the door sealed shut with a faint click. I stood alone, spoon in hand, stomach aching with readiness. From the window above the sink, I saw the moon blink once, then vanish. A voice behind me whispered, "You're ready." I turned. The tall version of me was gone. In his place, a mirror, not a reflection, a doorway. Inside it, I saw the kitchen again, empty, clean. Before all of this, before the laugh, I reached out, touched the glass, felt like rind, soft, yielding. My hand passed through, then my arm, then all of me. I walked back into my own kitchen, back into a moment that hadn't happened yet. On the counter sat a watermelon, uncut, smiling, breathing, waiting. The watermelon on the counter pulsed once, a soft tremor beneath its skin like the shiver of a beast pretending to sleep. I approached slowly, barefoot, leaving behind no footsteps, though I could hear them, wet echoes trailing behind me like regrets with rhythm. The kitchen had reset itself, scrubbed clean of horror, yet humming with something deeper, a knowing, a hunger unfulfilled. The clock blinked 12, frozen in an eternal moment of beginning, refusing to tick forward. I reached the counter. The watermelon sat in silence. Its rind glistened under the cold kitchen light, droplets forming like dew, except they smelled faintly of copper and sugar. I placed my hand on it. The thrum beneath its skin matched the beat of the thing inside my belly. Symmetry. We were in agreement. We had always been. Behind me, the refrigerator door creaked open. I turned slowly. Inside was no food, only a chair. Wooden, familiar. The kind your grandmother dies in. I sat. The fruit remained where it was, but its presence thickened the air, like incense made from spoiled childhoods. I closed my eyes. I saw the faces of the guests, not the smooth versions, the real ones, wrinkled, lost, confused. Some had been me. All had been someone. The floor beneath me softened. It beat. It pulsed. A vine slithered from under the fridge and coiled gently around my ankle, not tight, not forceful, just there, like a whisper you've been trying not to hear. My body warmed, my mouth opened, and from deep within me, the first seed emerged. It hovered in the air, spinning, trembling, then split in two. From those halves, a new fruit grew mid-air, shaped like an eye, textured like guilt. It stared at me. I stared back. We didn't blink. A voice, not mine, not human, slid out from the ceiling vent. It's your turn now. The kitchen light flickered. The seed eye collapsed into ash. I stood. I returned to the counter. I picked up the watermelon. It was heavier than before. Heavier with meaning, with memory, with me. I opened the back door. The world beyond was not the street. It was a field, endless, filled with kitchen tables and bowls of unnameable fruit, with people seated, waiting to be fed, their eyes hollow, their stomachs humming. I walked into that field. I took my place at one of the tables. I set the watermelon down. I raised the spoon. And somewhere, across 1,000 kitchens, someone picked up a fork and asked the same question you're asking now. What am I eating? And why does it taste like the truth? If this story tasted like something familiar, if it made your stomach twist or your mouth dry, then you're already ripening. Don't fight it. Embrace the flavor. Subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who swears they don't dream anymore, and remember, the fruit is always watching.